Hello, everybody. Dr. Yang here. And this is the first of our couple PowerPoints in lieu of class today or Wednesday. Not sure when you will be watching it, but anyway, here's the first one. And so we are going to start our discussion here on research designs. So if we were in a class, what I would do is I would throw this up here and ask you to think about this. So instead, what I would like for you to do is just pause, read the prompt, and think about two reasons why we might see a change in the improved social skills from students between 7th grade and 9th grade. So just go ahead and pause the video and jot these answers down because we're actually going to come back to this at the end of this PowerPoint. So my hope is that you have some answers to sort of compare. So go ahead and take as long as you need to jot those down and then come back and hit play again. So we started our discussion on research designs roughly a week ago by talking about survey designs. Now, survey designs live in this weird world where they don't have an experimental component and they're really not even quasi-experimental. It's really just a form of large-scale data collection, either with a specific population or a population that you are hoping to generalize from. But we also talked about those because they're really common in social work. But now I want to shift gears a little bit. And instead, we are going to talk about two main camps of research designs. The first is the experimental camp of research designs, which is what this class's presentations are going to focus on. And then quasi-experimental designs, which we will begin our discussion on next week when we resume our time together. So experimental research designs rely on randomization. And this is something we're going to talk about when we get to the sampling chapter here in a couple of classes. But really what we're talking about here with a true experimental design is like drug control trials, right? We've heard a lot about this with COVID, about blind studies where they are trying to test whether or not the vaccine is effective. So what happens is you have people that sign up and they say, hey, I'm interested in the COVID vaccine trial. And they say, lovely, you will be participant 9786. And you're like, okay, great. And then you don't know, the researchers don't know, and it's called a double blind. So the doctors don't know and you don't know. And what happens is you show up and they put a shot in your arm and you have no way of knowing whether that shot in your arm is a placebo or the actual vaccine. So, because this is randomized, we can say with confidence that the results are generalizable, meaning we can apply them back to the broader population. When we have these type of designs, we have really strong protections for internal validity and causality. Causality is just a fancy research way of saying that we are confident, we believe very strongly that our intervention did in fact cause the results that we saw. And so true experimental designs are really helpful for things like vaccine trials or drug testing. But in a lot of human subjects research, especially the kind that we as social workers do, we can't really randomize people because it's not ethical to deny treatment. So we rely a lot on quasi-experimental designs, which don't have a component of randomization. Randomization just means that every single person in a population has an equal opportunity of being selected to participate. That's probably a good term for folks to know that we should know what the term randomization means, or a random chance. And quasi-experimental designs don't have that element. We can compare groups, right? So this is a typical design that we see as a waitlist control, where you can only serve 10 people in your program at a time, but people who are on a wait list will also take the surveys or the measure. And then they will move into the treatment group when their turn on the wait list is up. So we can do some things to improve the scientific rigor of these quasi-experimental designs, because generally speaking, the more data points, the better the data will be. But we will dive into this a little bit more on Monday. So when we're talking about experimental designs, or any design really, we have to pay a lot of attention to the validity. So I want you to think back to that lovely bullseye image that we had a couple of classes ago. Remember, reliability is, are we able to hit the same point on that target over and over and over and over again? But validity asks us, are we hitting the right target? Are we hitting the thing that we are supposed to hit when we are supposed to hit it? So there's two types of validity that we can talk about. We can talk about internal validity, which is cause and effect, right? Are we able to say with confidence that the changes we observed in our participants are because of the intervention that we provided? Okay, so that's internal validity. External validity is when we talk about, would this work with other folks, right? So if we had a drug that we were testing, if we could clearly demonstrate that the symptoms of the participants improved because of the drug that we got, then that is internal validity. If we are confident that other people would have that same experience, then we are talking about external validity. Okay? So again, this is that being able to hit the bullseye over and over and over again, not just the random point on the target. But when we talk about internal validity, really what we're looking at are causality. Can we say that the results of our study depict causality? So did we have someone who was experiencing symptoms? They participated in our intervention, they took our drug, they got our vaccine, they did X, Y, and Z, and then they got better. Now, when we talk about causality, we have to have three criterion that are met. Our cause has to precede the effect, okay? So someone has to be sick with symptoms before you give them a treatment, okay? We can't say that our COVID-19 vaccine is effective for people who live on a planet for which there is no COVID, okay? We can't say that this medicine is effective at treating heart conditions in people who have good hearts, okay? So the problem has to be there before we provide treatment. And the symptoms have to improve after the treatment is given. Okay, so there's a correlation, there's a scientific relationship between the cause and the effect. Lastly, we have to be able to rule out any possible third variable. So thinking about a COVID vaccine. So someone does not have COVID, they get the vaccine, and then they are exposed to COVID-19. Do they get better? Well, you have to make sure that they're not doing anything weird, like participating in another drug trial. You have to make sure that they aren't taking like 500,000 IUs a day of echinacea or vitamin D or some other sort of substance that might explain the effects that you're observing. So to have really high internal validity, meaning I can say for sure that my intervention improved the symptoms for the people in this study. I'm hitting that bullseye. You have to make sure that the problem is there before the effect, or the intervention is there before the improvement. The cause is correlated, so there's a scientific relationship that we will be able to describe mathematically here later in the course. And we have to be able to say that that relationship cannot be explained by a third variable. So I want you to go back now to what you jotted down at the beginning and think about your 7th graders. Are there threats to this? Do we have temporal precedence, which is a fancy way of saying the things on this slide, okay? Do we have temporal precedence? Can we say for sure that there was an intervention that caused the improvement? Or was it something else? So go ahead and jot down whatever thoughts you have. I'm going to check in with folks about this when we come back together on Monday. So make sure you jot them down somewhere you can keep them. Thanks for hanging out with me. We will move on to our next presentation. So go get a snack, go stretch, and we will reconvene for part 2.